Hey guys, tonight we're going to take a long, sleepy ride down a dusty trail where stories hide in the corners of forgotten saloons and even the wind seems to whisper things nobody's supposed to know. You're out here now under the slowest sunset in America, where supper takes 2 hours to boil and a good story might just outlast the coffee. You've just tied your horse to a post that squeaks like an old fiddle, and the scent of pine wood smoke drifts from a crooked stovepipe nearby. Your boots crunch on gravel that ain't moved since the railroad stopped whistling in these parts. It's one of those nights where silence ain't empty. It's full of memory. And just so you're warned, between here and the nearest saloon is 10 miles of rattlesnake silence and one grumpy coyote. You won't make it out here unless you learn to talk to tumbleweeds. Or at least listen. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And let me know in the comments where you're listening from town time, even what your sky looks like right now. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Why? You drop your saddlebag next to the fire pit, the ground warm beneath you like the sun forgot to leave. You didn't come here looking for trouble, but trouble don't always come with boots on. Sometimes it rides in quiet, tucked inside something green and prickly. You wouldn't think a plant with needles for skin and water thinner than weak coffee could ever matter to anyone. But back before pills came in plastic and doctors rode in Buicks, healing came from whatever didn't bite you first. See, out here on the frontier, folks learned to work with what they had, and what they had was cactus. The first time you hear about cactus juice being used as medicine, it's from a fella named Clem who hasn't bathed since the last comet sighting. He tells you with a straight face that cactus water cured his dry lungs and broken luck. You nod politely, mostly because his beard looks like it could house a squirrel. But later that same day, you watch a woman pour cactus sap onto a burn, and the skin stops blistering like the desert itself stepped back. No one claps, no angels sing, just a quiet understanding passes between her and the land. Most folks think of cowboys and bullets when they hear Wild West. But truth is, more people were killed by infected blisters than by six-shooters. And if you didn't know how to stop a fever or pull a splinter before it turned green, well, that's how cemeteries got filled faster than banks. Now here's something funny they called it: cowboy cough syrup. But it didn't have sugar and sure didn't taste like cherries. It was boiled cactus pulp mixed with wild honey, sometimes a little salt if you had it, and a whole lot of guesswork. If your throat stopped burning by morning, they'd call it a miracle. If it didn't, well, at least you tried. Old-timers said the secret was to pick the cactus at dawn when the sun hadn't baked the bitterness in yet. They'd slice it with a knife carved from deer bone, drain the pulp into a canteen, and mix it with whatever else the land gave that season: mesquite, bark, pine ash, maybe even a drop of whiskey if it was payday. You sit there now, the fire cracking low, and imagine someone doing all that, not because they were trained, but because there was no one else. No doctor, no second opinion, just a mother or a brother or a ranch hand with more hope than sense. You remember reading somewhere that the earliest known cactus healer was a woman named Mara, half Mexican, half Mescalero Apache, who carried a belt full of glass vials and a voice softer than wind on cotton. They say she could stop a fever with a whisper and a poultice made of cactus, mint, and spit. The spit was optional, but tradition is tradition. Some say her concoctions work better than the frontier doctor's powders. Others claim it was just fear of her machete that kept patients from complaining. And here's the thing, historians still argue whether cactus juice actually did anything. Some claim it was full of electrolytes, natural antiseptics, all that. Others say it was all just hydration in disguise. But nobody denies one truth: it gave people hope. And out here, that's more medicinal than anything in a bottle. Remember that guy Hank from the halfway station? The one who thought horses could drink coffee? Yeah, well, he once swore that cactus tea cured his bad knees and worse gambling. Though come to think of it, that might have been the lack of poker that helped. But you sip from your own tin cup now, just hot water and sage leaves, and wonder what else the land has been hiding from us. What other medicines sleep under thorn and stone, waiting for someone brave or desperate enough to trim? The fire's lower now, embers glowing like forgotten coins. A breeze curls past your boots, full of desert hush and something older. Somewhere far off, a coyote sings, or maybe it laughs. You pull your blanket tighter and lean back, letting the night settle into your bones. The first story's done, but the dust still carries whispers. Let's keep going. You wake to the smell of pine smoke, and something sweet like sap and dust had a baby. The fire's mostly ash, now soft and glowing, and your saddlebag has tilted like it's trying to sneak away. But the air is calm, the kind of calm only deserts and broken clocks know how to keep. Somewhere behind the hills, the sun's just rubbing its eyes, not quite ready to climb. You hear a spoon clink against a tin cup. You didn't pack one, which means someone else is up. That's how you meet her. She's sitting on a flat stone, braiding her hair, like she's got all the time in the world, and none of it belongs to you. Skin like warm cedar, eyes like thunder about to break. You figure she's in her 20s maybe, but her presence, that quiet, feels older than the mountains. Her name is Taya. She doesn't ask yours. She opens a small leather pouch and lays out what looks like a surgeon's kit, if surgeons were raised by wolves and grandmothers. There's a curved bone knife, a little jar of crushed blue petals, a vial of what she calls sun-thickened sap, and one long thorn that looks like it remembers every time it's ever drawn blood. Taya isn't a healer. At least she doesn't call herself one. She just says, "When someone hurts, I help." You ask her where she learned it all. She shrugs. "My mother helped a man with a snake bite," she says. "He lived. He left. He sent books." That's all you get. But what she doesn't say is louder than what she does. This morning, she's got a patient, a little boy with a cactus spine buried in his cheek. Happens more often than you'd think. Boys chase jackrabbits. Jackrabbits hide in prickly places. The kid doesn't cry. Probably knows better. Instead, he sits like a lump of sunburn and shame while Taya hums a tune older than fences and flicks out the spine like it's nothing. Then she dabs the spot with her Thorn Kit's prize ingredient juice from a cactus called Nighthold. It's not the usual nopal or barrel type. This one only opens at night like a desert secret. Its sap is thicker than milk, cool to the touch, and somehow smells like rain on metal. Taya mixes it with powdered mesquite bark and a pinch of ash from lightning-struck trees. For heat, she says. Then she smears it gently across the boy's skin. The redness fades like it's embarrassed to be seen. You ask if it really works. She gives you a look like you just asked if birds need wings. They used to say this juice pulled infection, like the moon pulls tide, she mutters. Now they say I'm strange. But strange things keep people breathing. Some historians believe women like Taya midwives, bushcrafters, thorn sisters, were the real reason frontier towns didn't all turn into graveyards. Others write them off as folklore wrapped in dirt and herbs. No one can agree. But here's the truth. Taya carries no gun, wears no badge, and yet when she walks into a room, even the dust seems to rise in respect. You sit beside her as she grinds cactus pulp in a bowl shaped from antler. She lets you smell it. It's sharp, bitter, and behind it something like memory. She laughs. The plant remembers. If you harvest wrong, it stings your dreams. She tells you how to cut the cactus with thanks always at the base, never after noon. Otherwise, the plant turns hot, too wild to be medicine. You watch her bandage a man's hand rough from rope burns, and the poultice smells like a storm stuck in a bottle. He sighs like it's the first time his skin has been quiet in days. One time, Taya says she used cactus sap to seal a cracked boot. Another time, she used it to shut up a preacher with a sore throat and too many opinions. You ask if she ever thinks about becoming a real doctor. She spits, not rudely, more like punctuation. Doctors forget the land. I don't want that. Fair enough. They say every healer leaves behind two things: a story and a mistake. Taya's mistake. She once tried to save a dying cow with the wrong cactus. Turned out it was one of those hallucinatory varieties. The cow sang to a fence post for 3 days, then refused to eat anything but blue corn tortillas. Nobody blamed her. Instead, the town started calling her the girl with the thorn kit. Not out of mockery, but respect. Because her cures weren't from books, they were stitched from instinct, sky, and whatever wasn't nailed down. That night, you see her again. She's under the same sky, tying up her kit with care. She sees you watching. You think cactus juice is strange, she asks. Wait till you meet the mule doctor. You smile. Something tells you this story's just getting warmed up. You sleep lighter now. Not quite rest, not quite waking the way travelers do when the stars are too bright and the wind sounds like it's rehearsing old secrets. Morning comes slow, dragging its boots across the sand. You stretch, brush the dust off your hat, and realize Taya's already gone. But someone else is coming up the trail. You hear the hooves before you see him, slow, deliberate, like they've stepped this exact path 100 times. And then he appears slumped in a leather saddle, long coat, stiff with sun-bleached salt, and behind him a mule that looks like it's done more thinking than most judges. The man's name is Dr. Willoughby P. Stokes, though no one says the P without smirking. Most folks just call him Doc Mule. He tips his hat like it weighs more than his regrets and says, "You the one who spent the night with the Thorn Girl." You nod, unsure what flavor of judgment that sentence carries. He doesn't explain. Just slides off his mule with the grace of a man who's dismounted more patience than bar stools. Doc Mule isn't like the fancy city doctors with their clean hands and colder hearts. His satchel's patched with twine, smells faintly of onion poultice and cigar ash, and holds more mystery than a preacher's diary. You got a cough, he asks? You shake your head. Good, I'm fresh out of kindness. He chuckles to himself, then pulls out a small tin of greenish paste and sets it near the fire. The smell is sharp, like eucalyptus and regret. That's cactus balm, he says. Made it myself, helps with bruises, boils heartbreak, and mother-in-law visits. In that order. He talks while unpacking, not to you exactly, more like to the air. Says he used to study medicine back east. Dropped out when he realized most professors didn't know a tumbleweed from a liver. What they call primitive remedies out here, he grumbles, saved more lives than all their lectures combined. Then he shows you his prized formula, a tonic brewed from cactus juice, peppermint root, and a very specific kind of creek water. Claims it reduces fever, steadies nerves, and gives hope just long enough to survive the week. Of course, some say Doc Mule once tried to cure sunstroke with mashed cucumbers and molasses. Others say he accidentally invented a hangover remedy that turned into a popular meat marinade. Either way, people keep riding 2 towns over just to see him. His most famous success, a young widow with 4 kids and a cough that rattled like snake bones. He gave her a tea made from barrel cactus pulp and wild bee honey. The fever broke. Her voice came back. Now she sends him a balm every winter. The last one had a note. Your cactus juice made me believe in breathing again. The thing about cactus juice, he explains, is that it ain't just the sap. It's the ritual. The slicing at dawn, the mixing with ash, the patient waiting. No boiling, no rushing. You've got to let the desert speak or it won't give you what it knows. He's got one story he always tells about a rancher who'd lost both sons to snakebite and had stopped eating altogether. Doc Mule didn't use sermons, just brought him a jar of cactus tincture and said, "This here is bitter like your grief, but it's also alive." The man drank it, didn't smile, but 3 days later he saddled up again. Whether it was the juice or the gesture, nobody can say. And here's something for the curious. Historians today still debate whether Doc Mule's concoctions had any true pharmacological merit. One group claims they were just folk medicine with placebo strength. Another argues the compounds in the juice had mild antibacterial and anti-inflammatory properties, at least compared to doing nothing. But out here, compared to nothing was often the only comparison that mattered. Doc Mule leans in, then lowering his voice like he's about to share a government secret. You know what the real magic is, he says. It ain't the cactus. It's that someone took the time to care when nobody else did. You nod. You get it now. Out here in places where the sun burns names off gravestones and silence forgets your footsteps, medicine ain't just what you swallow. It's the story behind the hand that offers it. He throws a few dried cactus husks onto the fire, and the smoke turns sweet and blue. Smells like somewhere between church and childhood. You watch it curl into the sky and something inside you settles. Later, as Doc Mule saddles his beast and heads toward the next speck of civilization, he calls back over his shoulder. Next time you see that Thorn Girl, tell her I still want my jar back. And just like that, he's gone. The dust he leaves behind settles gently like it's tucking itself in for a long sleep. And you're already wondering what the next story will bring. You're starting to notice something funny about this part of the world. Not funny, haha, more like funny, hmm. It's how nothing ever seems to matter much out here until it does. Like a gust of wind that sounds just like your name, or a jar of green goo that turns into legend. That's what happened in the town of Lonesome Pitch. Not much left of it now. A few upright beams pretending to be buildings, a saloon sign that groans when it swings in dust, so fine it sneaks into your socks and soul. But back in its heyday, Lonesome Pitch had two things going for it: good pie and bad decisions. And from one of those bad decisions came something folks ended up calling cactus cream. The name makes it sound like a dessert, doesn't it? Something you'd spread on toast or sneak during Lent. But this wasn't a treat. It was a salve, a healing paste. And depending on who you asked, it was either a miracle or an allergic reaction waiting to happen. It all started with a woman named Estelle Beauregard, the saloon keeper's wife, an unofficial town nurse. Estelle had a voice like velvet dipped in vinegar and the kind of stare that made even drunk gamblers sit up straighter. She wasn't trained in medicine, didn't need to be. She had instinct hands steady as Sunday pews and a deep suspicion of store-bought anything. One day a cowhand stumbled in with a nasty burn. Some accident involving a stove, 2 jugs of moonshine, and a bet no one could remember. Estelle didn't panic. She disappeared behind the bar, came back with a bowl of mashed cactus pulp mixed with bear grease and a pinch of lavender for dignity, she said. She smeared it on this burn while humming a tune only 2 people in town knew. 3 days later, the skin was pink smooth and better than before. Word spread like prairie fire. People started lining up at Estelle's back door, holding out blisters, boils, sprains, and hopes. She never charged, just said leave a coin or a compliment. Eventually, she gave the concoction a name, Cactus Cream, and that was the beginning of a little frontier phenomenon. Of course, some folks were skeptical. Old Joe Crandall claimed it gave him hives the size of biscuits. But then again, Old Joe was allergic to anything that wasn't fried. Most people swore by it, said it healed saddle sores, soothed baby rashes, and once stopped a dog from limping. Estelle kept her recipe secret, but rumors leaked. Some said she added wild honey. Others swore it was raccoon fat. A traveling preacher once accused her of witchcraft. She smiled, handed him a jar, and said, "Witch this on your knees, preacher." He used it, never limped again. Even now, some descendants of Lonesome Pitch carry a tiny tin of cactus cream wrapped in oilcloth. It's family lore passed down like a bad habit and a good story. Historians, of course, can't agree on much. Some say Estelle just used the soothing properties of mucilage-rich plants, things that locked in moisture and kept flies out. Others say it was the placebo effect wearing a bonnet. But here's something they miss. When you're out here and the nearest doctor's a week away, belief can be just as powerful as biochemistry. Estelle believed in her cream, and the people believed in her. You find yourself thinking about her now as you watch the last coals of the morning fire fade to gray. There's something comforting in the way old stories wrap themselves around you like a worn blanket. You can almost hear Estelle's voice, that half laugh, half sigh, way frontier women talked when they were too tired to be gentle and too kind to be cruel. She'd probably look at you now, sunburned and blinking into the wind, and say, "You look like you could use a dab of cactus and a night off your feet." You'd nod, because out here where the earth forgets and remembers in the same breath, a little jar of green cream might be the difference between pain and peace. You pack up camp slowly, brush the sand from your boots, saddle your horse who snorts like you owe him something. Maybe you do. As you ride toward the next whisper of a town, you wonder what else folks learned to bottle in this land of sun and silence. You suspect the answer is a lot more than we'll ever know. Midday heat creeps in like a lazy outlaw, not rushing, just confident you won't stop it. The sky's a hard blue stretched tight as a drum, and even the birds have gone quiet. You're somewhere between 2 towns that don't speak to each other anymore, riding past saguaro cacti that look like old men stuck in conversation with the sky. And that's when you remember the story of Dead Wind Gulch. No one names a place like that on accident. It was a mining camp, once barely a town. Had a schoolhouse with no teacher, a saloon with no piano, and a main street that mostly hosted arguments and tumbleweeds. But it's best remembered for a fever that came and went like a ghost with poor manners. They called it the dry fever. Started with a scratchy throat, then chills even in that desert heat. After that confusion, folks wandering out into the sun mumbling about lost keys or dead brothers. Within days, they were too weak to saddle a mule. By the end of the second week, 10 men and 4 children were in shallow graves. The town prayed. It boiled water. It even listened to the preacher's long-winded ideas about sin and improper poker games. Nothing worked until a boy named Jeb found a cactus blooming in the shade of an old ore cart. The bloom was violet, shaped like a star, and unlike anything the locals had seen. Jeb, being 12 and impervious to fear or logic, cut it open and drank the liquid inside. His fever broke that night. Next morning, he told his mother, who told the preacher, who told the saloon keeper, who predictably tried to mix it with whiskey. Didn't taste good. But the townsfolk boiled the pulp with salt, mashed it into a tea, and within 3 days, folks started recovering. The strange part, the cactus vanished after that bloom, never flowered again. Some say it was a one-time gift. Others whisper that the plant had done what it came to do. Modern botanists argue about what it might have been, possibly a rare hybrid or a misidentified night-blooming cereus. One even suggested it was all a folktale created to explain an unusually fast recovery cycle. But again, historians talk about what might have happened. Folks who lived it, they just say Jeb saved the town with a cactus and a kid's dumb luck. Years later, a traveling artist came through Deadwind Gulch before it dried up for good and painted that mysterious cactus from Jeb's memory, hung the canvas in a church in Yuma. They say if you stand close enough, you can smell something sharp like mint and wet earth. Of course, that might just be the church janitor's cologne. You sip from your canteen now warm water that tastes faintly of metal and story. And you wonder if you had been in Deadwind Gulch during the fever. Would you have trusted a child with cactus water over a preacher with promises? Most folks say no, but when your skin's hot and your breath comes shallow, even a whisper of hope starts to sound like a hymn. You pass a ridge now, just rock and sky, but for a second you swear you see something bloom behind a stone. A flicker of violet. It's gone before your horse blinks. The breeze picks up, carries with it something cool, something wet, like the land remembering how to be kind. You tip your hat toward it, because sometimes kindness shows up once bloom saves and disappears. And maybe that's enough. You ride a little slower now, not just because the sun's heavy on your shoulders, but because your thoughts are too. It's strange how stories settle into you out here like sand in your boots. At first, you barely notice. Then one day you realize you've been walking funny ever since. Somewhere up ahead, a sliver of tin catches the light, a roof maybe, or just a very determined mirage. You nudge your horse, who groans like he was enjoying the break, and head toward it. Turns out it's a saloon, or what's left of one. 3 walls, 1 swinging door, and a roof that sags like it's had one too many. Still someone's there, whistling off key and stirring something in a pan. That's where you meet Rudy. Rudy's not a bartender. Not anymore, he just never left. Said the town did, but the stove stayed warm, so he figured he'd stick around in case it needed company. He invites you in like he owns the win, offers a seat made from a broken wagon wheel, and hands you a mug of something that smells like regret and rosemary. It's experimental, he says, with the grin of a man who thinks recipes are for cowards. What Rudy's really known for, though, isn't his stew. It's his sneeze dust. Yep, you heard that right. See, Rudy used to run the saloon's apothecary shelf, just a little corner by the whiskey barrels where folks could grab a handful of mint, a dash of pepper leaf, or whatever else they believed might fix them faster than prayer. Over time, Rudy started mixing things, for colds, for headaches, for mornings after. Then one day he tried something new. Crushed dried cactus flowers, cayenne, a hint of dried tobacco leaf, and something he only refers to as pollen, from that bush that makes goats sneeze. He powdered it, put it in a snuff tin, called it Frontier Wind, claimed it would clear your sinuses, chase away melancholy, and reboot your brain like kicking a mule in the face, but friendlier. He gave it to a stagecoach driver who'd been too congested to sleep. The man sneezed 7 times, passed out snoring, and woke up saying he'd dreamed of Colorado. Word spread. Soon folks came from towns over to buy the stuff. Not because it worked, although many swore it did, but because sneezing that hard reminded them they were alive. Some even claimed the dust helped more serious ailments. One woman said it stopped her hay fever for a whole week. Another claimed her husband, who hadn't spoken in 6 months, sneezed so hard he yelled beans and hasn't shut up since. Of course, not everyone was thrilled. The sheriff banned it after 3 horses bolted when a gambler exploded in a sneezing fit during a poker game. But Rudy just moved underground. Literally. Ran his dust operation out of the saloon cellar for a time. Nowadays, he doesn't sell much, just makes small batches for friends. but he lets you try some just a pinch. You hesitate, then sniff. For a moment's silence. Then your sinuses clear like windows in spring. Your ears pop. Your eyes water. And somewhere deep inside your skull, a sleepy voice mutters, "Well, hello there." Rudy grins, hands you a cloth to wipe your nose, and says, "Told you, it's like Cactus Tea's rowdy cousin." Modern historians. They mostly ignore Rudy's invention, say it lacks scientific backing, and besides, anything that makes you sneeze that hard can't possibly be good for your soul. But Rudy's not worried about historians. They write papers. "I write relief," he says, tapping the tin. "Besides, some of us gotta keep the weird traditions alive." You sit with him a while, sipping his stew, which tastes like hope trying its best, and watch the wind play through the open wall like it's eavesdropping. There's a comfort here, not in the building which is half collapsed, but in the way Rudy talks to everything like it's still listening. The bar, the stove, even the cactus in the corner with a cowboy hat on top. "That's Terry," he says. "Good listener." You laugh. You don't mean to, but it feels right. Before you leave, Rudy hands you a tiny cloth pouch. "Keep this," he says. "Next time the world feels stuck, take a sniff, blow it all out." You nod, because maybe sometimes the best medicine isn't healing. Maybe it's just remembering how to sneeze, laugh, and let go. You ride off into the shimmering afternoon, pouch in your pocket, nose still tingling in the memory of a man who made dust into a remedy and didn't even charge admission. The sun's dipping now, slow and syrupy, casting long shadows across the land, like fingers trying to hold on. You ride through mesquite groves that hiss gently in the wind, and the air smells like warm metal and old prayers. You're not in a hurry. Out here, the light doesn't so much fade as it leans back, puts its boots up, and tells one last story before bed. And that's when you hear the rattle. Not a snake. You know that sound. This one's deeper, heavier, like a canteen full of marbles rolling down a dusty hill. You round a bend and find him, a man squatting in the shade of a boulder, holding something that gleams green in the fire-orange light. He looks up and grins with half his teeth. You look like someone who'd appreciate a good experiment. His name, you never get it. Just a nod, a handshake that leaves your fingers sticky with sap, and a story he tells like it's been waiting all day to be spoken. He tells you about cactus water versus snakebite. Now, you've probably heard snakebite stories before. Everyone has. But this one's got a twist no doctor ever recommended or admitted to witnessing. Years ago, this man, let's call him Amos, lived on the edge of Apache territory. Traded tobacco for corn bullets, for pottery, stories for silence. One day, while fixing a busted wagon axle, a rattler got him, right on the forearm, deep, fast, no one else around for miles. He panicked naturally, but not in the flailing, screaming way. More like a man who already knows the end of the book, but keeps reading anyway. Amos had two things nearby: a flask of cactus water and a knife too dull to cut cloth. So in an act that historians today still argue was either heroic or wildly foolish, he drank the entire flask of cactus water and muttered, "If you're gonna die, die hydrated." Then, and here's where it gets fuzzy, he claims he chewed the pulp of a nearby cactus he called sunhurt and smeared it on the bite, laid there under a mesquite tree, and sang old work songs to keep his pulse even. 3 days later, he woke up, arms swollen, sure but alive. Now, was it the cactus water, the chewing, the singing, or just luck holding his hand a little longer? Depends on who you ask. Modern scholars say cactus water's got electrolytes and hydrating properties, sure, but neutralizing venom? Unlikely. Folk medicine enthusiasts, though, they argue that some cactus species contain alkaloids and astringents that might slow the spread of venom, or at least reduce inflammation. But the real debate isn't chemical. It's about belief. See, Amos believed that cactus water could save him, or at least give him time. And out here, time is everything. Time to wait to breathe to see if your story's done yet. He shows you the scar, a pale, jagged ribbon just below the elbow. Taps it gently. "That's where I learned to listen to plants," he says. "Not with your ears, with your fear." You ask if he's ever tried the remedy again. He chuckles. "Only got bit once, that was enough. But I've taught the trick to 7 people. 6 made it. 1 got married instead." You raise an eyebrow. "Her fella fainted before she even got the cactus open," he shrugs. "Guess she figured weak stomachs are easier to live with than snake venom." You laugh, not because it's funny, but because something about the desert teaches you to laugh at things you don't fully understand. He hands you a piece of dried cactus, says it's the same kind he used. In case the snakes get bold, he winks. As night starts to gather itself into pockets, you thank him, mount up, and tip your hat. He waves once, then sits back down, already carving something into the rock with a cactus thorn. Maybe it's a warning. Maybe it's a recipe. Maybe it's just a man reminding the desert he was here. You ride on moon rising like a lantern behind you, and you wonder, what else out here has saved lives quietly, stubbornly, without ever asking for credit? And would we even notice if it bloomed right under our boots? You don't remember falling asleep, but the stars do. They were watching. You must have drifted off under that patch of mesquite, the one that hummed in your bones, like a lullaby only desert creatures hum. And now the morning's tapping at your face with sunlight filtered through dust and memory. Your horse is already awake, giving you that look. The one that says, I could have left you for coyotes, but I didn't. So maybe feed me first today. You oblige, stretch, and saddle up slow. You're still thinking about the cactus and the snakebite and the man who may or may not have sung himself out of death. But today's trail smells different. There's a sweetness in the air. Smoke, but not fire. Something richer, like wood soaked in sugar pine sap on a stovetop. You follow it down a slope that used to be a path and now is more suggestion than trail. That's when you find it, a trading post, leaning hard into the wind, held together with rusted hinges and stubbornness. The paint's long gone, but someone's drawn a cactus in charcoal on the side with a smiley face, no less. A cowbell clangs as you step through the warped doorway. And there she is, Mrs. Quimble. Don't call her ma'am. She'll throw a ladle at you. Mrs. Quimble has run this trading post for 47 years, 3 husbands, in one minor bear attack. She wears a braid that could tie up a wagon wheel and glasses so thick they double as fire starters. She doesn't say hello, just pushes a jar across the counter. Try this. You sniff. Sweet, spicy, a little green. It's cactus jelly, she explains, but made the old way, with vinegar, mint, and a whisper of wild honey. Helps the throat and the temper. You taste it. It sings on your tongue the way memory sometimes does when it comes back clear. Quimble's trading post is more than it looks. There are jars of herbs, bundles of sage-polished bones, a hat made entirely of turkey feathers, and most importantly, shelves lined with bottles filled with different shades of green. Cactus water, she says. Not just one kind. 8 varieties. Some for energy, some for sleep. One labeled Heartbreak Mild. But the bestseller, Hope in a Bottle. That's what she calls it. Clear, liquid, faint scent of citrus and dust. Folks come from 3 counties to buy it, not because it cures anything exactly, but because people swear they feel better holding it. I started making it during the drought of '68, she says. Folks had nothing to drink and nothing to believe, so I gave them both. The label's simple. If this doesn't fix you, it'll at least remind you you're still here. You pick one up. The glass hums faintly in your hand. She tells you about a boy who stopped speaking after losing his sister, took 3 sips of the stuff, and wrote a poem. A poem with no rhymes and bad spelling, sure, but the kind that made his mama cry in a good way. A man who lost his farm drank half a bottle and decided to start growing sunflowers. Even the town sheriff carries one in his coat pocket. Just in case the world forgets how to be kind, he said once. Of course there are skeptics. One newspaper editor wrote an editorial titled, Cactus Juice is not a cure and other obvious facts. But that man now lives alone with 3 cats and a calendar from 1983. So maybe his judgment ain't all that solid. You ask Mrs. Quimble how it works. She shrugs. I boil what blooms, bottle what remains, and trust the rest to the moon. She hands you a bottle. No charge, she says. But don't waste it on aches. Drink it when you forget why you're walking. Outside, the wind shifts, carries the scent of sage and something older. You tuck the bottle into your pack, nod your thanks, and step back into the dust. Somewhere behind you, the cowbell clinks again like it's waving goodbye. And as you ride away, you feel something light in your chest. Not like laughter, more like the absence of heaviness. Maybe that's what hope really is. Just remembering for a minute that you're still here. The trail out of Quimble's place runs gentle for a while, like it's easing you back into the world. The air's cooler now, carrying the smell of old cedar and the faint sweetness of drying cactus flowers. Your horse walks steady, head low, like even he's a little reluctant to leave that bottle of hope behind. But you're not done yet. A couple miles on, you start to hear it, a soft clink, like tin tapping tin. Then a creak, then a long drawn out, Hmm, that feels like it's been echoing since before state lines were drawn. You follow the sound. It leads you to a porch sagging under the weight of time and dust, and a man sitting on it, boots up, eyes squinted into the distance like he's waiting for a question to form. He's older than the porch, you think. Maybe older than the town he used to protect. A faded star still glints faintly on his vest, tarnished silver, like a memory that won't polish up no matter how hard you try. Sheriff Delmer Rowe. He's got two things left in the world: a rocking chair that moans like an old dog, and a cup of cactus tea that smells like dirt and comfort. City says, without looking at you. So you do. He doesn't talk for a while. Just sips rocks, hums an off-tune waltz. Finally, he says, "You know, I outlived two doctors." You raise an eyebrow. They came through town years apart. One had glasses too big for his face. The other had ideas too big for his britches. Both buried now. And I'm still here, because I don't trust pills that come in colors. He grins slow and sideways. Delmer credits his long life to a morning routine that's baffled many impressed few and hasn't changed since he turned 31. Tin cup of cactus tea at sunrise and a silent conversation with the dust. Not just any cactus, mind you. He brews with Desert Spoon, a wiry, mean-looking plant that grows in bad soil and worse attitudes. He slices the base at dawn, steeps it with a pinch of pine ash and a flick of tobacco, drinks it hot, no sugar, no talking. Claims it keeps the joints loose, the lungs clear, and the memories mostly friendly. Doctors who visited once called it nonsense with an earthy aroma. Delmer called them funerals with diplomas. And here's the thing, whether it's the tea or sheer stubbornness, the man's 86 still rides twice a week and hasn't had a cold since the railroad left. Local folks respect him. Some fear him. Everyone listens when he says things like, "Don't shoot what you ain't willing to bury," or "Never trust a man who whistles before breakfast." You ask if he ever felt lonely outliving everyone. He looks out at the road for a long time. "Lonely ain't so bad," he says. Gives the cactus more room to grow. He pours you a cup of the tea. It's sharp, bitter. Tastes like secrets and rocks. Burns a little on the way down like it's checking your insides for lies. You sit there a while, the two of you listening to the wind argue with itself. Delmer tells stories slow and sparse like fence posts stretching into the horizon. He once used cactus pulp to clean a gun barrel. Once rubbed it on a horse's cracked hooves. Swears he even used it to patch a saddle once, though you can't tell if he's joking. Historians don't know what to do with men like Delmer. He doesn't fit into their tidy timelines or clever footnotes. There's no record of his cactus tea in any medical journal. No proof, just one old man in the absence of illness. But sometimes absence is enough. As the light turns gold and long, Delmer stands with a creak and a sigh. He walks you to your horse like he's seeing you off to war, hands you a pouch of dried leaves. "In case you run out of reasons," he says, "steep this, sit still, listen to what the steam tells you." You nod. Because there are some gifts you don't question. You ride off slow, the taste of the tea lingering like a prayer you didn't know you needed. And as the sheriff fades in your rear view, you realize he never once asked your name. Didn't need to. Out here, what matters isn't who you are. It's what you'll carry forward. The road after Delmer feels quieter somehow. Not just because the wind's gone still or the birds have slipped into hush, but because you've changed. You're carrying things now, a pouch of dried cactus, a bottle of bottled hope, and the heavy hush of a sheriff's gaze that saw more than you said. You keep riding until the dirt turns redder, the rocks sharper, and the air smells faintly of horses and beans. That's how you know you're close to the Ridge Fork Corral. Used to be a place for cattle drives and poker games under the stars. Now just a few leaning fence posts, a broken water trough, and a horse that looks at you like it's got opinions about your saddle posture. But this ain't about the animals. It's about a horse that saved lives. They called her Mercy. Dark bay with a streak of white across her nose, like someone had swiped a paintbrush in passing. Mercy wasn't fast, wasn't even particularly obedient, but she had a knack, a strange, soft, silent instinct for sniffing out things folks needed. Especially Cactus. See, back when the Ridge Fork outpost still had a few families clinging to it, there was a sickness, maybe from the river, maybe from bad beans, maybe just the usual wrath of nature. Kids got fevers, mothers coughed till dawn, even the preacher started coughing between verses. No doctor for miles. But Mercy, she kept breaking her lead, wandering out into the dry flats and returning with her mane, tangled in a very specific kind of cactus, spiny low to the ground, smelled like lemon rind and vinegar. Nobody had paid it much mind before. Until someone noticed the kids she laid near started sleeping better, breathing easier. So the townsfolk got curious, crushed the cactus, mixed the pulp with hot water and a touch of molasses. And it worked. Not like magic, not like a sudden cure, but like a door cracked open just wide enough for healing to step in. The fever eased. The preacher got his voice back. One boy who'd been coughing so hard he sounded like he'd swallowed a banjo finally slept through the night. They called the brew mercy water. And folks would follow her whenever she wandered because wherever she stopped, the cactus grew. Now maybe she just had a taste for that particular plant. Or maybe she'd been trained, though no one ever admitted to doing so. But some believe Mercy knew the desert's secrets, knew who needed them. There's even a story, quiet, half-whispered by old women with crooked smiles, that once Mercy stopped walking when she reached a dying man alone in the flats, laid beside him, nuzzled him, stayed there 3 days. When someone finally found them, the man was alive. Weak, parched, but alive. And the cactus she'd led him to, it was blooming in December. Of course, scholars roll their eyes at this, say horses don't have that kind of sense, say plants don't bloom out of kindness. But you sit there now under the same sky that watched it all, and you think maybe they don't need to. Maybe it was just timing and dirt and good luck. Or maybe the desert knows how to send help in the shape of a horse. Mercy died quietly years later in the same spot where the cactus first grew. They buried her with a braid of her mane and a note that simply said, "Thank you." And every now and then a traveler will swear they see hoof prints circling a patch of blooming cactus, even when no horse is near. You take a drink from your canteen. Let the silence stretch long. The kind that isn't empty, it's just waiting for the right words. You stand, brush the dust off your coat, and tip your hat not to a person, but to a horse who in her own quiet way reminded a town that healing doesn't always gallop in. Sometimes it walks, slow, sure, and covered in dust. Evening again. You don't remember when the sun started leaning westward, only that the light turned syrupy and thick, like the day had slowed down to sip itself. The desert does that, slips time into your pockets when you're not looking. You ride on belly warm from canteen water that's been pretending to be tea, and your thoughts drift as they often do out here towards stories. And tonight they drift toward the church on Sand Hill. Not much of a church, more a rectangle of wood with a bell that never rings on time. But folks still gather, still kneel, still argue about whose mule ate whose hymn book. Years ago, though, there was a problem. They called it the dry haunting. Not ghosts exactly, but the kind of spiritual unease that settles in when the rain doesn't come, crops don't grow, and prayers start sounding more like apologies. The minister, Reverend Myron Greaves, was a good man. Not great with sermons, but he had a voice like slow thunder and a knack for baking cornbread. But that dry season wore on him, on everyone. Dust piled on windowsills, baptisms were postponed, and inside the chapel the air felt angry. They tried everything. More prayer, less prayer, reading louder, reading softer. Then came the oil. See, Myron's wife, Miss Claudette, wasn't one for waiting on miracles. She believed in doing. So one morning she mixed something up, cactus oil steeped with sage, lemon rind, and a few drops of lavender for the angels. She dabbed it on the pews, the altar, even on the Bible's spine. And that Sunday, something changed. No thunderclap, no divine vision. But the air shifted, smelled cleaner. The congregation sat a little straighter, and for the first time in months, someone laughed during the offering. So they kept using it, called it spirit oil, said it cleared bad luck, stubborn moods, and gossip that stuck to your shoes. Myron started carrying a little vial in his coat pocket, dabbed a bit on newborns, wiped it on doorknobs before weddings. Folks claimed it helped headaches, calmed nerves, even quieted babies. One man swore it cured his back pain, though that might have been from finally sitting in a pew padded with quilted cactus husk. Naturally, the oil gained fame. Travelers passing through would stop by just to buy a bottle. Miss Claudette made them in small batches, whispered over them like she was stirring an extra grace. But one Sunday, a merchant from the city came in, offered her $50 for the recipe. She smiled sweet as syrup and said, "Child, it ain't the oil, it's the hands that pour it." The merchant left with nothing but a headache. Historians find this story inconvenient. No one agrees on the ingredients. Some say it was superstition. Others claim the aromatics actually soothed the brain, lowered heart rates, and reduced tension. But none of them explain how it made a room feel warmer or how a smell could hush a grief before it turned to tears. You pull your horse to a stop now. There's a breeze pushing over the hills. It smells faintly of sage and something soft beneath it, something that almost feels like memory. You think of the oil, of a woman stirring something good into a world that had grown too hard. And maybe that's all healing is. Not grand cures or lightning bolts, but the small, steady acts of care. Like oil on a pew, like lavender on a prayer book. Like someone noticing that the air doesn't feel quite right and doing something about it. You ride on as the sky slips into lavender itself, and the desert holds its breath in that moment, just before night. A bell rings far off. You don't know if it's real, but you smile anyway. Night settles like a blanket. Someone stitched too wide, soft, quiet, and full of creases where memories hide. The stars come out slow, as if unsure they're still welcome. Your horse walks without needing much direction, as though he's memorized your thoughts, or maybe just the road. And tonight the road leads to a song. You don't hear it at first. Just feel the rhythm in your ribs like the earth is humming under your saddle. Then the melody finds its way to your ears, low, mournful, gentle. A man's voice cracked around the edges, but carrying something stronger than pitch, longing. You find the shack tucked against a boulder's chimney, puffing lazy smoke into the sky. No windows, just a door held shut with a rock and optimism. You knock. The man inside doesn't answer, just keeps singing. So you let yourself in. He sits by a tiny fire legs crossed, strumming a 4-string guitar that's missing a fifth and doesn't care. His beard's braided, his hat's patched, and next to him on a little wooden crate is a jar. Green, cloudy, half full. You sit across from him, wait until the song fades. Then he says, "She left me cactus juice in a song." You don't ask who, he doesn't explain. Turns out the man's name is Isaac Finch. Used to play in saloons, piano, fiddle, whatever the whiskey allowed. Said his voice wasn't much, but folks listened anyway. Until the sickness came. Lost his lungs for a while. Couldn't sing. Could barely whisper. No doctor. Just a woman named Naya, part Comanche, part mystery, who handed him a jar and said, "Drink this, then sing until it's gone." He laughed, but drank. Said it burned going down. Not like fire, like truth. Sharp, earthy, with a hint of something that made him remember his mother's cinnamon bread. He coughed for a day straight. Then on the third morning, his voice came back. Weaker, rougher, but back. So he sang every day, sometimes just to the wind, sometimes to the dust, sometimes to no one. But the coughing stopped, and the fear too. He refilled the jar with his own mixed cactus water, sage root, a splash of corn liquor. Called it Echo Tonic. Said it wasn't medicine, but it made the notes sit easier in his chest. And ever since, folks have come to hear him sing, not because he's good, because he reminds them. Reminds them that voices like health, like love, like light, sometimes go quiet, but they can come back. A little broken, sure, but still here. He plays another song while you sip from his cup. The tonic is bitter, smoky, and somehow warm, like it learned how to hug. You close your eyes. Let the tune wrap around you like an old quilt. Later, as he stokes the fire, Isaac says, "You know what cactus juice is really for?" You shake your head. "It's not for curing," he says. "It's for carrying. Something old, something lost. A sound you thought was gone." And he sings one more song. This time you hum along. Because somewhere in your chest, under the dust and the miles, something stirs. Something that almost sounds like you. Something worth remembering. The dawn that follows doesn't rise, it stretches. Long golden limbs across red stone and brittle grass. You wake to it slowly, like a man who's forgotten he was dreaming. The fire's gone cold, Isaac's shack already behind you, and the desert hums with that strange stillness that only comes after song. Your horse seems to feel it too. Walks softer, doesn't complain. And somewhere down the trail, past a crooked fence and a line of stones that used to mean something, you find the cemetery. No gate, no names you recognize, just 100 wooden markers leaning like old men in prayer. But there's one that stops you, a smooth, flat stone. Words carved careful, deliberate. For the knees that cough in the cold nights, E.B. Below it, a recipe, a list really, and 3 parts cactus pulp from young bloom, 2 parts bear grease, 1 part beeswax, whisper of juniper smoke. Apply under moonlight, preferably after laughter. You stare at it a long time. This is Estelle Beauregard's resting place. You remember her from Lonesome Pitch. The woman with vinegar in her voice and velvet in her hands. The one who invented cactus cream, not because she wanted to, but because no one else had. Turns out, she didn't just leave behind stories. She left instructions. A legacy in lotion. Around the marker, there's ground's dry but not barren. Someone's been tending here. You see old cloth ribbons, polished stones, even a rusted spoon half buried near the base. Offerings, maybe? Or just things people left when they had nothing else. You kneel, brush the dust away from the edges of the stone and feel the tiniest lift in the air, like the desert's holding its breath. And that's when you see the second carving. On the back, smaller letters, faded but still stubborn. If you're reading this, you're still here. Use what you've got, trust what you know, and don't forget to smell the damn flowers. You smile, because of course Estelle would get the last word. There's something holy about this, not religious maybe, but reverent. Like the land itself bowed just a little when she passed, like she gave back more than she ever took. You think about the people she helped, the babies whose fevers broke under her hands, the husbands who smelled like bear grease and love, the widows who found balm not just for their joints, but their grief. Historians never wrote about her second recipe, never found the stone. They'll argue for years about the origins of herbal salves and folk cures, about whether bear grease actually absorbs into skin, about whether moonlight changes molecular structure. But they won't argue about what she gave people, comfort, in a world that offered none. And isn't that medicine too? You stand, dust your knees, leave a button, the only one left on your cuff, at the foot of the stone, a thank you in frontier currency. Then you ride, slow, thoughtful, like maybe the trail isn't just a place but a way of being. And the wind carries your thoughts forward past graves, past recipes, past everything that couldn't quite be bottled but still managed to heal. Because sometimes the cure isn't in the cactus. It's in the hands that dared to try. By now the road and you are old friends. It doesn't surprise you anymore when the wind shifts, like it has something to say, or when the shadows stretch just so, pointing you towards something not marked on any map. So when you crest the next ridge and see a wagon with one wheel missing, sitting crooked, like it's winking at you, you tip your hat to it like it's an invitation. The man leaning against it is wrapped in a canvas cloak, chewing on something that might be licorice or might be stubbornness. His face is weathered, but his eyes, they sparkle like mischief, packed itself into two marbles and never left. Name's Silas. I sell what don't make sense, he says before you can speak. You look like someone who needs a story or at least a distraction. You tell him you've had both. He grins wider. Well, then you're about due for a man in a cactus hat. That's when you see that hanging from a peg on the wagon side. A hat made entirely of woven cactus strands held together with beeswax and imagination. Wide-brimmed, sturdy-looking, and absolutely ridiculous. Silas puts it on like it's a crown. You laugh, he says, but I've sold 117 of these. Each one to a fella who said he didn't believe in nothing until he wore this and something happened. You ask, something like what? And that's when the stories come. One man wore it to a wedding and ended up the groom even though he was just delivering horseshoes. Another claimed it protected him from lightning twice, though Silas admits he may have been drunk and near a barn door. But the most famous story, that belongs to a man called Elridge Goss, a traveling salesman with a wagon full of jars, snake oil balm, cough tonic, foot powder, all the usual. Except one jar had no label, just green liquid and a note that said, "Ask only when needed." No one ever bought it, until one day Elridge ran into a town struck by some kind of silence. Folks weren't sick, just still. No one spoke above a whisper, no songs, no laughter, just the shuffle of feet and the rustle of curtains. Elridge, feeling brave or foolish, put on the cactus hat, held up the green jar and shouted, "Anybody miss noise?" That night the town danced. No explanation. Just something about the way he carried himself, or maybe the cactus hat, broke some invisible tension. Whatever it was, people remembered how to feel again. Silas says that's when folks started believing that some things don't heal you, they just shake loose whatever needs healing. You ask what was in the jar. Silas shrugs. Probably water and peppermint, or hope and a dare. He hands you a bottles from the back of his wagon. No label, just a wax seal and a smile. On the house, he says, or on the trail. You take it. Because if there's one thing you've learned from all these cactus-scented tales, it's this. The cure might not be in the bottle. It might be in the reaching. The moment you believe again. The pause before the sip when you think, maybe. And as Silas tips his cactus hat and disappears behind the wagon like he was never there, You ride on bottle in your pack, wind in your ears, and a grin on your face you didn't know had grown there. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rolls. But it sounds more like applause. You don't rush now. Wouldn't feel right. The trail's narrower here, more suggestion than path, winding through canyons where the rock glows rose and gold in the fading sun. The world's quiet but not empty. It's full in that way old barns are, with dust memory and things too patient to speak first. You come over one last ridge and see a familiar rise, low hill. One bent tree, a single flat rock you sat on nights ago. It feels like a loop closed without anyone forcing it. You didn't mean to come back, but you did. And there, nestled just off the trail, half covered by brush and memory, is the same little shack where you started. The fire pit still rings with soot. The rock still remembers your boots. The wind still has your name caught in its teeth. You dismount, stretch, sit. It's darker now. The sky's deep indigo stars beginning to blink like old friends coming back from a long walk. You lay your coat down, unwrap the bottle Silas gave you, set it on the stone. You haven't opened it. Don't plan to. Feels like it's already done what it needed. You pull out the other things, the pouch of cactus from Delmer, the cloth packet of sneeze dust, the leftover cactus cream from Estelle's grave, and the tiniest slice of dried violet cactus, just enough for memory. You didn't expect to carry these things. You didn't expect to change, and maybe that's the point. You stare into the dark a while, then light a fire with 3 matches and a prayer you don't say out loud. The flames curl up slow, orange soft. You hear the click of hoof beats in the distance, or maybe it's just your heartbeat remembering Mercy's walk. Then you speak not to anyone, not even to yourself, but to the night. There's healing in strange places. A pause. Sometimes it's in the hands, sometimes it's in the hat, sometimes it's just knowing someone tried. You lean back on your elbows. The fire cracks gentle. And you think about all the cactus juice you've seen boiled, bottled, smeared, sung about, prayed over, doubted, believed in, buried, and carried. Maybe it's not about what was in the juice. Maybe it's about what people poured into it, their hope, their effort, their stubborn belief that something, anything could help when nothing else could. You remember what Taya said about listening with your fear. You remember Rudy's sneeze dust, Doc Mule's bitter tonic, Isaac's voice returning, the preacher's wife in her spirit oil, Estelle's recipe carved in stone. All of it cactus, all of it medicine, all of it a kind of love. The fire burns lower now, gentle as breath. You wrap your coat around your shoulders. Somewhere nearby, a coyote sings one long, low note, not quite mourning, not quite celebration. Just presence. You lie back. The stars are everywhere, not blinking anymore, just steady, watching. The wind hushes. Even the dust settles. And the last thought you have before sleep slides in like a shadow too polite to knock is this. Out here, the sun may be harsh, the night's cold, the land unyielding. But even in this place, something bloomed. Nam, bụi đường lăn xuống, tiếng gió thở đều qua khe núi, một nhành sương rộng run nhẹ trong giấc mơ của ai đó. The story's gone quiet now. Just the crackle of old coals, just the slow blink of stars, just you still here, still breathing, still healing. End of script, sweet dreams.